Hello everyone, today is June 11, 2025. Here are the latest financial news at Finance Today MX, with our top story today. Trump's tariffs, although not reflected in inflation, are already impacting some companies. Stories of the day. Trump's tariffs, although not reflected in inflation, are already impacting some companies. The tariffs ordered by President Donald Trump's administration on virtually the entire world, including the 30% tariff on products shipped to China, are affecting the costs of companies in the United States, and some of them are already passing the impact on their prices or plan to do so. The World Bank cuts its GDP outlook for global and Mexico, but does not foresee a contraction. Rising trade tensions and high uncertainty around the world are contributing to a deterioration in the global economic outlook for this year and next, World Bank economists said in their June outlook report. Business. Liverpool ends alliance as distributor of Chinese car brand BYD. The Port of Liverpool, Mexico's largest department store chain, decided to end its alliance as distributor of the Chinese electric car brand BYD, a decision it says is being made as part of its plans to strengthen its commercial proposition. Cemex raises $1 billion with perpetual bond to pay down debt. Cemex, the Mexican construction materials giant, raised $1 billion with the sale of a perpetual bond, intended to refinance debt and use the proceeds for other general corporate purposes. Vind plans to raise $1.25 billion with 5- and 7-year green bonds. Vind Viviendas Integrals, one of the leading housing developers in Mexico, plans to raise $1.25 billion pesos, $385.6 million with the sale of 2 5- and 7-year green bonds on the local stock market. Janama Lab to pay 1,004.5 million pesos on bonds placed in 2023. Janama Lab, a producer and marketer of medicines and personal care products, announced that on June 11 it will make an early payment of $1,525,233. 33 pesos, $52.7 million on a bond placed in 2023. Disney to pay Comcast $438.7 million to acquire control of Hulu. The Walt Disney Company, a company dedicated to the production of entertainment content and the operation of amusement parks, agreed to pay an additional $438.7 million to close the purchase of NBC Universal's 33% stake in the on-demand content platform Hulu from Comcast, following the conclusion of a years-long independent appraisal process. In other news, Farmacias del Ahorro enters the pet segment with online guidance and products. The Mexican chain Farmacias del Ahorro announced its entry into the pet segment, initially offering free online veterinary advice.
Alphabet faces a possible fine from COFECE for Google's monopolistic practices. Google, the largest internet search engine owned by Alphabet, will face a possible sanction from Mexico's antitrust regulator on June 17 if authorities determine that the U.S. technology giant created an illegal monopoly in digital advertising in the country. Fibra Storage receives an upgrade from HR Ratings after bond refinancing. Fibra Storage, a real estate trust specializing in operating and developing mini warehouses for self-storage, received an upgrade in its long-term national scale credit rating from HR Ratings, due to the refinancing of a green bond on June 3 of this year. Economy. Marcelo Ebrard rules out General Motors' plans to close plants in Mexico or lay off workers. Economy Secretary Marcelo Ebrard ruled out plans by the U.S. automaker General Motors to close plants or lay off workers in Mexico, following a Bloomberg report indicating that the company is seeking to reduce its dependence on its factories in Mexico. Mexico, U.S. close to agreement on steel and aluminum tariffs, according to Bloomberg News. The governments of Mexico and the United States are close to reaching an agreement that would eliminate 50% tariffs on steel and aluminum imports up to a certain volume, similar to an agreement reached during Trump's first term, Bloomberg News reported.
BBVA Mexico predicts a contraction of the national economy in 2025 despite lower tariffs. Mexico's economy will contract this year due to uncertainty associated with U.S. trade policies, changes in the judiciary, and the government's fiscal consolidation process, even though it is very likely that the country's exports will end up paying lower tariffs than the rest of the world, said economists at BBVA Bank Mexico. U.S. China closed second day with rapprochement and after resuming Geneva agreements. High-ranking officials from China and the United States ended the second day of talks in London a little closer to reaching a trade agreement that would end the tariff war between the world's two largest economies. Sheinbaum rejects instigating protests in the U.S. after accusations from the government. Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum denied that she had promoted violent demonstrations in the United States, while that country is experiencing a wave of protests in cities with high levels of immigrants, such as Los Angeles. Bank of Mexico's international reserves rise to a record $240.443 billion. Bank of Mexico's international reserves grew by $461 million during the week ending June 6, reaching a new record of $240.443 billion. Inflation in Brazil rises 0.26% in May and 5.32% annually. Brazil reported inflation of 0.26% in May, the weakest increase in the last 4 months, despite pressures in the housing and electricity sectors, reported the Brazilian Institute of Geography and Statistics, IBGE. Markets. Peso falls against the dollar for the first time in 5 days. The exchange rate halted 4 days of gains, at a time when investors remain cautious amid news about trade negotiations between the United States and China. Wall Street rises after U.S.-China negotiations continue. U.S. benchmark stock indices closed higher on Tuesday as trade negotiations between the United States and China dragged on for a second day, with the possibility of extending into Wednesday. Oil prices fall for the first time in 4 sessions. Oil prices halted 3 days of gains as investors remained cautious ahead of the meeting to smooth over trade differences between the United States and China. 28-day seats unchanged, others fell at Bank of Mexico auction. Government bond rates in Mexico remained mostly lower during the Bank of Mexico's most recent securities auction, as investors prepare for a possible additional cut in the national benchmark rate. S&P/BMV IPC and the FTSE, BIVA turned positive. The Mexican stock market improved its tone at the end of trading on Tuesday, overcoming early morning losses on a day of low data, awaiting economic and trade updates.
Thanks for listening. If you have found this information useful, please help us by subscribing to the channel as well as share, comment and click on the bell so you get the latest and greatest financial news every day. Sincerely, thank you. Have a good one.